Here we are at Flip Culture TV. Thanks for coming back for another week. We just got off of Shoot Your Shot, and now I want to talk about once we're in the relationship and what's going on and how a guy affects it. So that's why I decided to call this GUYnamics. Now there's a couple of topics that I'm going to talk about that I've been thinking about heavily and that I put together that I'm currently going through right now when we look at a relationship. So it doesn't mean that it's just held to this. It doesn't mean that it's only this. It doesn't mean that what I'm saying is solid gold. It's just something that I'm thinking about constantly and that I work on constantly. So the three parts that I'm going to give you is trauma, the ego, and where am I at now? Those are the three things we'll talk about, dealing with GUYnamics. So as a guy in a relationship, we always focus on women and what women do to the relationship, the excess luggage or baggage that they're bringing in. But what we tend to never hear about is the male and what they bring in to the relationship and what problems or what excess baggage or luggage they may have that they don't know about and that they may have not addressed and that they are just sitting up there trying to hide for the time being. And that's what I realized I was doing daily in relationships that I had, whether it was with a girlfriend, a friend, parents, my siblings, anything. So that's what I talk about, is the GUYnamic part of relationships. The first word that I'm going to give you is trauma. Men always bring a certain amount of trauma. Trauma meaning trauma that they're aware of, trauma that is inherited, and trauma that they're dealing with currently. So the trauma that they're dealing with currently could be maybe that their main focus isn't on the relationship. They may be trying to start a business. They may be trying to lose weight. They may be dealing with work, and they're just currently dealing with it on a day-to-day basis right then and there. So understanding that doesn't mean that it won't change. It just means that the focus is going down a certain avenue during that time period. Another part of the trauma is trauma that they don't even know about. They currently could be going through something so tumultuous inside and they can't give it a name or they can't give it a face, but it's something that plagues them every morning. Or they may be having the same dream every night and they wake up and they just know that they're in a bad mood or mad at life. And they have no earthly idea why, but they now bring that into their day-to-day life. So their work relationships hinder from it, their friendships hinder from it, their spouse hinders from it. It could be a multitude of things, and they're not even understanding why they're going through it. In light of things going on with COVID and the riots, those things, that's a certain amount of trauma that even if they don't think they have a current diagnosis of the situation, they're still thinking about it subconsciously. I know I have been. I know I've been thinking about it a lot lately, but it's just in the back of my head because of everything else that I'm currently having to do day in and day out that stays in the forefront of my brain. So that's something that you can think of as far as trauma that they're dealing with that they weren't ready for and that they didn't know that they were going to be dealing with it. I think the big one that we deal with day in and day out, and I think that everyone can relate to, is inherited trauma. Whether it could be a drinking problem or binge or addiction, anything that you can think of that is inherited through legacy, through your parents, your grandparents, that you've seen constantly due to where you live, due to culture. It's just inherited. There's a certain amount of trauma that I'm going to take on with me just because of past generations in my family tree. And that's the one that we kind of know about, but we tend not to tackle. And you've heard a lot lately about break the curse or break the family legacy. There's certain things that we want to bring forward, and then there's certain things you don't want to. Even when it comes to disciplining kids, it could be trauma from there. If you were someone who used to get spanked all the time, I know I was, then you don't want to sit up there and say, I'm going to spank my kids because it may have been traumatic for you. Or you may realize that's the only way you listened, and I'm going to do this with my kids. Then now, whatever trauma you have from those situations, you bring to the next generation. So you just have to be aware of the trauma, because then the people that you interact with day in and day out in close relationships, then they can help and guide and be part of your village to help you in the way that you need. And that's the difference, is we do have these villages, we do have these people, but we're not acting as our true selves for them to help us through it. The ego, I think that's the biggest thing that men don't want to talk about. So I know I'm a big ego alpha male type person, and if it helps or hinders my ego, I don't know till hindsight, right? Till I'm like, okay, I shouldn't have did this, or I should have did this differently. So what I have done in my recent relationships is suppress it. One thing that I've done to get rid of that ego is to say I'm a learner. I went from saying, hey, I know everything, to I'm a learner. I want to learn something new. And the more I kept saying that, I realized people looked at me differently and treated me differently. I think we as men, no matter what, no matter who your circle is, you bring a certain amount of intimidation. So when you come to your spouse or your friends or your parents as a learner or as a non-threat, they open up to you more than you would have got if you would have stayed yourself and said, I know this, I'm going to do this. This is what's going to happen. Because then they close off and then they don't want to open up to you. So the ego is something really big to look at when it comes to you as an individual. And lastly, really what you look at is, where is the man at currently? When you look currently in day-to-day life, where do I stand in society? I think we look at that as we get older, and you reflect and you say, what have I done? What have I imparted on the world? And where am I going? And for me, that's what this whole Flip Culture TV is about. It's for me to say, where am I at and where am I going? And so the next generation can see where I was and where I'm going to get to. And no matter how this grows or where this stays, that's what my intent was for this. So as partners and as a village, how do you help the man out is by saying, hey, where are you at currently? What are you looking for? What successes are you wanting? What are you suppressing? What do you think about on a constant basis? I had someone ask me the other day, what's on your mind? What are you doing? And I realized I was in deep thought and what was racing, but I didn't realize it at first. It was just me sitting up there and eating, thinking that I'm hiding it very well. So being a guy and the dynamic that you have in all the relationships surrounding about you is so important for you to understand, but more important, so people in your village understand how they can be a better help to you and how they can just be a better support to you. Because at the end of the day, no matter what any man says, they want support and they want help. It's just how you're extending the olive branch. So remember, don't focus on the luggage, focus on the contents of what's inside that bag. And let's get ready for another Tuesday talk. And hopefully your village will grow and get bigger as mine has. Thanks for tuning in. Always find me on True Visionary XIV. And again, Flip Culture TV. See you soon.